Today we're going to be discussing circulation of blood and lymph. The first several slides have word parts of the cardiovascular system and lymphatic system and their definitions. This next slide has prefixes for the cardiovascular and lymphatic system. Prefixes go at the beginning of the root word. This next slide has suffixes for the cardiovascular and lymphatic systems. Suffixes go at the end of a root word. And then the next two slides have some important abbreviations for the cardiovascular and lymphatic systems. So blood vessels deliver blood to the tissues. The three types of blood vessels are arteries, capillaries, and veins. Arteries carry blood from the ventricles of the heart to the organs and tissues of the body. Arterioles are the smallest branches of an artery, and they are important in regulating blood pressure. The wall of an artery or vein has three layers, or tunics. We have tunica intima, and that is the inner layer of the wall or artery or vein. It consists of endothelium that forms a smooth surface for blood. The tunica media is the middle layer of an artery or vein. It consists of connective tissue and smooth muscle. In large arteries, this is the thickest layer and contains several layers of elastic fibers. Finally, we have the tunica adventia, and this is the outer layer of an artery or vein. It consists of connective tissues rich in elastic and collagen fibers. With arteries, you have something known as vasoconstriction, which is when the walls of an arteriole constrict. Vasodilation is the opposite. That is when the walls of an arteriole relax. So constriction, constrict or get tighter. Dilation, relax. So vasoconstriction and vasodilation help maintain appropriate blood pressure and also help to regulate blood volume. From the arteries, blood flows through capillaries, which are tiny vessels that form extensive networks within each tissue. Capillaries permit oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, and other materials to be exchanged between blood and tissues. We have something known as meta-arterioles, which are small vessels that directly link arterioles with venules. Venules is small veins, arterioles are small arteries. Whenever a capillary branches from a meta-arteriole, a smooth muscle cell serves as a precapillary sphincter. These sphincters open and close continuously, directing blood first to one and then to another section of tissue. Precapillary sphincters help regulate the blood supply to each organ and its tissues. Blood passes through capillaries into veins, which are the blood vessels that conduct blood back to the heart. Veins are generally poor in oxygen, except for the pulmonary veins, and venules are the smallest veins. This is a picture that shows the three layers of an artery and a vein, and also shows what a capillary looks like. Within the body, the blood flows through a continuous network of blood vessels that forms a double circuit. So you have pulmonary circulation, which connects the heart and the lungs, and then systemic circulation, which connects the heart with all the organs and tissues. We're first going to discuss pulmonary circulation, and again, that connects the heart and the lungs. You have pulmonary arteries, which are the blood vessels that deliver blood to the lungs. and then pulmonary veins, which return blood rich in oxygen to the left atrium. So if you're following the blood flow through pulmonary circulation, it would be right atrium to the right ventricle, to the pulmonary arteries, to the pulmonary capillaries, to the pulmonary veins, ending in the left atrium. So the second circuit in the body is systemic circulation, and that carries blood to and from the tissues. So blood returning from pulmonary circulation enters the left atrium and is pumped into the left ventricle. The left ventricle pumps the blood into the largest artery in the body, which is the aorta. Branches of the aorta then deliver blood to all the organs of the body. So there are four main regions of the aorta, and there's a picture of this on the next slide. First, we have the ascending aorta, which is the first part of the aorta that travels upward. Next, we have the aortic arch, which curves from the ascending aorta and makes a U-turn. We have the thoracic aorta, which descends from the aortic arch, passing through the thorax. And finally, we have the abdominal aorta, which is in the region below the diaphragm. It descends downward through the abdominal cavity. The thoracic aorta and abdominal aorta together make up the descending aorta. So if you're following blood flow through systemic circulation, it would be left atrium to the left ventricle into the systems. And here is a picture that illustrates the different parts of the aorta. As blood circulates through capillaries in the tissues, it delivers nutrients and oxygen to the cells and picks up carbon dioxide. Capillaries deliver blood to venules, and these small veins merge to form larger veins. Veins bringing blood back from the tissues drain into two very large veins, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. They return blood to the right atrium of the heart. So the superior vena cava receives blood from the upper portion of the body. The inferior vena cava receives blood returning from below the level of the diaphragm. There are four arteries that bring blood to the vein. The vertebral arteries are branches of the subclavian arteries, and they enter the cranial cavity in the mid-region of the cranial floor. And then we have two vertebral arteries which pass through the foramen magnum and join on the ventral surface of the brainstem. Together, the two ventral arteries form the basilar artery. So foramen magnum, that term just refers to the opening in the occipital bone through which the spinal cord passes. Branches of the internal carotid and the basilar artery, which if you recall is the two ventral arteries together, form a circle of arteries at the base of the brain, and this is called the circle of Willis. The joining of two or more arteries is called an arterial anastomosis. From the brain capillaries, blood drains into large venous sinuses located in the folds of the dura mater, which is the outer covering of the brain. A venous sinus is a specialized vein that has no smooth muscle in its wall. Blood from the venous sinuses passes into the internal jugular veins at each side of the neck. From there, blood circulates through the brachiocephalic veins and into the superior vena cava, which returns to the heart. And this is the flow of blood through the brain. We have a picture on this side that illustrates blood flow through the brain. So as you have seen, blood typically flows from arteries to capillaries and then to veins. The veins conduct the blood back toward the heart. However, the body has a few veins that carry blood to a second set of exchange vessels, either capillaries or sinusoids, and these are called portal veins. So we have the hepatic portal vein, which delivers blood from the organs of the digestive system to the liver. The hepatic veins leave the liver and empty into the superior vena cava. Blood is delivered to the intestines by the mesenteric arteries. The superior mesenteric vein empties into the hepatic portal vein, which also receives blood returning from the lower portion of the intestine and from the spleen. The hepatic portal vein conducts blood to the liver, where it gives rise to an extensive network of hepatic sinuses, which are exchange vessels somewhat like capillaries. As blood flows through the sinusoids, liver cells remove and store nutrients whose concentrations are above homeostatic levels. Liver cells also remove toxic substances from the blood. So each time the left ventricle pumps into the aorta, the elastic wall of the aorta stretches. This expansion moves down the aorta and into its branches in a wave that is faster than the flow of blood itself. As soon as the wave has passed, the elastic wall of the artery snaps back to its normal size. This alternate expansion and recoil of an artery is the arterial pulse. The ability of the large arteries to expand and then snap back to their original diameter is important in maintaining a continuous flow of blood. As the left ventricle forces a large volume of blood into the aorta during systole, the aorta expands to accommodate it. During diastole, as the walls of the aorta recoil to normal size, the blood is kept flowing into the capillaries. Without this mechanism, blood would rush through the arteries and into the arterioles and capillaries in enormous gushes each time the ventricle contracted. The resulting pressure and volume would damage the delicate walls of capillaries. Any superficial artery that lies over a bone or other firm structure can be used to measure pulse. These locations are sometimes called pressure points, because pressure applied directly on the vessel at these points may stop arterial bleeding if a wound is distal to a pressure point. So the most common pressure point that you would feel to check a patient's pulse is the radial artery in the wrist. Blood pressure is the force exerted by blood against the inner walls of the blood vessels. It is determined by the flow of blood and the resistance to that flow. The flow of blood depends directly on the pumping action of the heart. When cardiac output increases, blood flow increases, causing a rise in blood pressure. When cardiac output decreases, blood flow decreases, causing a fall in blood pressure. Blood flow is directly affected by blood volume. The normal volume of blood in the body is about 5 liters. If blood volume is reduced by hemorrhage or chronic bleeding, the blood pressure drops. In contrast, an increase in blood volume causes an increase in blood pressure. Blood flow is slowed by resistance. Peripheral resistance is the opposing force to blood flow caused by viscosity or thickness of blood and by the friction between the blood and the wall of the blood vessel. When peripheral resistance increases, blood pressure increases. The length and diameter of a blood vessel determine the amount of surface area in contact with the blood. The length of the blood vessel does not change, but the diameter, especially of an arteriole, does. A small change in the diameter of a blood vessel causes a big change in blood pressure. Blood pressure is expressed as systolic pressure over diastolic pressure. Arterioles have a small diameter. Arterioles can constrict and dilate by increasing or decreasing contraction of the muscle in their walls. Vasoconstriction is a decrease in blood vessel diameter, which increases resistance to blood flow. Vasodilation is an increase in blood pressure diameter, which decreases resistance to blood flow. Very little pressure is needed to force blood through the veins because the veins offer little resistance to blood flow. As a result, they can hold larger volumes of blood. So next we'll talk about the lymphatic system and the functions of the lymphatic system. So the lymphatic system is an accessory circulatory system. It consists of clear, watery lymph that is formed from interstitial fluid, the lymphatic vessels that conduct lymph, and the lymph tissues. The lymph tissues are a type of connective tissue with large numbers of lymphocytes. It is organized into small masses of tissue called the lymph nodes. The tonsils, spleen, and thymus gland are also part of the lymphatic system. The lymph circulation collects excess interstitial fluid and returns it to the blood. The lymph system has neither a heart nor arteries. Microscopic dead-end lymph capillaries extend into most tissues alongside the blood capillaries. When interstitial fluid enters the lymph capillaries, it is called lymph. Lymph capillaries conduct lymph to larger vessels called lymphatic vessels. At strategic locations, lymphatic vessels enter lymph nodes. As the lymph flows slowly through the lymph sinuses within the tissue of the lymph node, it is filtered. So macrophages and other phagocytotic cells remove bacteria and other foreign matter. So the tonsils are part of the lymphatic system. They're masses of lymph tissue located under the epithelial lining of the oral cavity and the pharynx. And the major function is to filter interstitial fluid. Next, we have the spleen. It's the largest organ of the lymphatic system. It lies in the abdominal cavity, posterior and lateral to the stomach, and is protected by the ribs. As blood flows through the spleen, macrophages remove bacteria and other disease organisms. Macrophages also remove worn out red blood cells and platelets. The spleen holds a great deal of blood. When the spleen is ruptured, extensive, sometimes massive hemorrhage can occur. When the spleen is removed, some of its functions are taken over by the bone marrow and liver. Other functions are simply absent and the body manages without. Finally, we have the thymus, which is part of the lymphatic system and plays a role in immune function. It's a pinkish gray lymphatic organ located in the upper thorax. During fetal development and childhood, the thymus is very large. It reaches its largest size at puberty and then becomes gradually smaller with age. And that's because children are being exposed to a whole array of pathogens and they need that extra immunity. And then as you age, you've already formed some immunity, so you don't need the thymus to be quite as large. Thymosin is the hormone produced by the thymus that's important to immune function. And then the last slide shows a picture of the different glands of the lymphatic system and lymph nodes.